He used to believe money could fix anything, until the crash took his legs and his will to live. She used to believe love was a luxury the poor couldn't afford, until she met the man who had everything except hope. When their worlds collide, pride becomes the wall between them, and compassion the weapon that tears it down. But tell me, do you believe two broken hearts can really heal each other? Or does love always demand too much?
Adrian Langston, once heir to one of the most powerful business empires in the country, hadn't left his mansion in nearly 8 months. He didn't need to. His father's money made sure the world came to him. Doctors, therapists, private chefs, none of them stayed long. He'd drive them all away, eventually. Always did. His voice, once confident and charming, now dripped with the bitterness of a man whose body refused to obey him. "You can tell my father I don't need another nurse," he muttered when his house manager mentioned someone new was coming. "I'm not a child and I don't need a babysitter." "Sir," the manager replied cautiously, "she's not a nurse, just someone who could help around." Adrian's eyes darkened. "I don't want anyone's help." He said it often, but even he no longer believed it. Across the city, in a narrow street that smelled of fried bread and old pavement, Elara Whitmore tied her hair back before leaving for her 3rd job that week. Her younger brother Noah slept fitfully on the couch, his thin frame rising and falling beneath the patched blanket. She'd left a note beside his breakfast. "Take your medicine. Don't wait up for me." Life had taught her early that hope didn't pay the bills. She worked in a bakery during the mornings, cleaned offices in the evenings, and did whatever odd jobs came in between. Her body was tired, but her pride was sharp, too sharp to ask for help. When her friend Maria handed her a flyer that read, "Full-time live-in caregiver needed, Langston residence," "A millionaire's house?" she scoffed. "They'd never hire someone like me." Maria shrugged. "They're desperate, and you need the money for Noah's treatment." That night, Elara sat awake staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside like a restless heartbeat. Hope or pride? Sometimes the two were enemies. By morning, she made her choice. Back in the Langston mansion, Adrian wheeled himself through the quiet halls, the soft hum of his motorized chair echoing in the emptiness. Every painting on the wall stared back at him, his father's taste, not his. Everything here felt curated, sterile, untouched. He hated it. He stopped by the grand piano in the corner. Dust coated the keys now. His fingers hovered over them, but refused to press down. He could almost hear the sound of laughter from months ago, before the accident, before the rain-slicked road, before his best friend's scream. He blinked hard, jaw tight. The memory was too loud to silence. Later that afternoon, a knock echoed through the mansion's long hallway. "Sir, the new helper is here," the manager called gently. Adrian didn't answer. He simply turned his wheelchair toward the window, again, eyes cold, distant. Outside, a girl waited nervously, clutching a worn handbag, her shoes still damp from the rain. She'd never seen such a house before. The doors alone were taller than her apartment ceiling. When they opened, she stepped in slowly, feeling the chill of wealth wrap around her like a warning. "Elara Whitmore," she said softly when the manager asked her name. She didn't know that just a few rooms away, a man sat in silence, ready to despise her before even knowing who she was. As the mansion's doors closed behind her, something unseen shifted. 2 people, one trapped by guilt, the other by circumstance, were about to collide in a way that neither could have predicted. And as stories often go, pain would be their first language, but not their last. If you were in Elara's place, would you have taken the job knowing it meant entering a world that might look down on you? The first time Elara saw Adrian Langston, she almost mistook him for a ghost. He sat by the window, his chair angled toward the light, pale sunlight spilling over his shoulders like reluctant mercy. His face was sharp, beautiful even, but carved in exhaustion, as though he had forgotten how to be human. "Mr. Langston," she greeted softly. He didn't turn. "You can leave whatever you brought in the kitchen." "I'm not here to deliver anything," she said. "I'm your new caretaker." That got his attention. His chair hummed as he spun toward her, eyes narrowing. "Your what?" She held her ground, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "The agency said I don't need a caretaker." His tongue was crisp, each word a blade. "I need silence. Can you manage that?" Elara inhaled slowly, her instinct screaming to walk away. But Noah's face, pale and weak, flashed in her mind, so she smiled, thin but unbroken. "If you'd rather starve in peace, I'll stay quiet while I cook." For a moment he just stared at her, surprised maybe, even impressed. People usually cowered. She didn't. "You talk too much," he muttered. "Only when someone's being rude," she shot back. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, yes, but also something else. Something like curiosity. Over the next few days, their exchanges became a silent war. She cleaned the room he never left, humming under her breath just loud enough to annoy him. He turned up the television volume in response. She ignored it. He tried sarcasm. She countered with humor. When he demanded coffee at exactly 8, she brought it at 7:50. "You look like the kind of man who appreciates punctuality," she said with a teasing grin. He didn't answer, but the faintest twitch of his mouth betrayed amusement. Underneath the bickering, something alive stirred. It wasn't friendship yet, maybe not even tolerance, but it was something. That evening, Elara stood by the window after cleaning up his dinner tray. The city lights glimmered below, like tiny promises she could never afford. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. Adrian looked up. "Miss what?" "Being out there, moving, feeling the wind." He said nothing for a long time. The silence between them grew thick. Then, without looking at her, he replied, "I don't think about it." But his hand clenched against the armrest, knuckles white. Elara watched him, her heart tightening. He wasn't cruel, just bleeding under his armor. Later that night, she passed his room to find the door half open. Inside, the light from the TV flickered across his face. He was trying to reach for the remote that had fallen just beyond his hand. Before she could stop herself, she stepped in. "Here," she said, picking it up. His voice came sharp. "I didn't ask for help." "I didn't ask for permission," she said. He turned his face toward her, eyes burning, but beneath the fire was shame. "Do you pity me?" "No," she said softly. "I just don't like seeing people suffer when I can help." The honesty in her tone unsettled him. He had heard pity before, from doctors, nurses, even his father. But this sounded like empathy, untainted by obligation. He turned away. "You should go." She hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Mr. Langston." As she left, he whispered to the empty room, "It's Adrian." That night, neither of them slept well. Elara lay awake in the small guest room, thinking about the strange man upstairs, the one who used cruelty like armor. Why had she seen sadness in his eyes when he pushed her away? And, upstairs, Adrian stared at the ceiling, the echo of her voice lingering like a melody he couldn't turn off. He had been alone for so long he'd forgotten what warmth felt like, and now it terrified him. Have you ever met someone who challenged your walls? Someone who didn't back down even when you tried to push them away? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know.
Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of silent battles filled the Langston mansion. Elara showed up each morning with the same quiet determination, and Adrian greeted her with the same indifference. At least, that's what he wanted her to believe. But even indifference has cracks. One morning, she found him struggling to move his chair near the terrace. "Let me help," she offered gently. He shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you always have to mother people?" She folded her arms. "Do you always have to bite the hand that feeds you?" Adrian blinked. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was short, dry, but real. "You're not like the others." "No," she replied, walking past him. "I'm poorer." The humor between them was a fragile bridge, but beneath it, tension thrived, the kind that came from two people who saw too much of themselves in the other. Later that day, Adrian's father, Charles Langston, arrived unexpectedly. His presence filled the mansion like a cold draft. Tall, commanding, dressed in gray, He had the look of a man who believed emotions were just inefficiencies. "Who's that girl?" he asked. His tone clipped as he spotted Elara arranging flowers. Adrian's expression hardened. "My caretaker." Charles frowned. "Caretaker or charity project?" "Don't start," Adrian muttered. "She's not qualified to handle your condition," his father said sharply. "I'll have the agency send someone better." "Better?" Adrian's voice rose. "Rare for him. You mean someone who'll nod and leave when I insult them?" Charles's gaze narrowed. "You used to understand the value of class, Adrian." "I used to understand the value of freedom." The silence that followed was heavy. Elara quietly stepped away, pretending not to hear, but every word lodged deep. That night, Adrian found Elara by the window again, staring at the city lights. "Your father seems protective," she said carefully. Adrian scoffed. "Protective? Try controlling. He thinks money can buy dignity." "Can't it?" she teased lightly. "Money buys food, medicine, roofs." He looked at her then, eyes dark. "Does it buy peace?" Her smile faltered. "No," she admitted softly. "Not that." There it was, the first sliver of honesty between them. But honesty brings danger. A few days later, Adrian overheard a phone call, Elara begging someone quietly for more time to pay her brother's hospital bills. He listened in silence, unseen. When she hung up, she wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and went back to work as if nothing had happened. That night, Adrian found himself awake long after midnight. Guilt gnawed at him, not for what he'd heard, but for wanting to help and knowing she'd never accept it. He was used to control, power, yet around her, every instinct collapsed. The next morning, he tried to push her away again. "Don't you have better things to do?" he snapped when she brought him breakfast. "Not really," she said calmly. "You're my job." "I don't need you." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I need you." The words hit him like a jolt. She didn't mean it romantically, he knew that, but something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, he didn't want to be left alone. That afternoon, Elara found him in the library staring at an old photograph, Adrian standing tall beside another young man. Both smiling, arms slung around each other. "Your brother?" she asked. He didn't answer. He simply closed the book. "Friend," he said at last, his tone distant. "He died." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. "I was driving." The weight of those words hung heavy between them. Elara wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, but his expression warned her off. He wheeled himself away, leaving her alone with the silence he left behind. That night, Adrian lay awake listening to the faint hum of her voice in the guest room, soft, steady, humming a lullaby. It reached him like a whisper through the walls, comforting and cruel all at once. He hated that he needed it. He hated that she made him feel alive again. And she, in her own small room, pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Don't fall for him, Elara. Don't be that foolish." But the heart rarely listens to reason. Do you think love can grow between two people divided by guilt and pride? Or does one always end up breaking first? The first storm of autumn rolled in overnight, fierce and unrelenting. By morning, the streets were flooded, the wind battering against the mansion's glass walls like a restless sea. Elara stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the rain streak the windows. "Guess I'm not going anywhere today," she murmured. Adrian wheeled in behind her, half smirking. "Good, maybe I'll finally get a quiet house." "Quiet?" she said, arching a brow. "You talk more than you think, you know." He huffed, but there was no real anger in it, just the faint amusement that had started threading their conversations lately. "Storm's supposed to last for days," she added. He looked out at the downpour. "You afraid of being trapped?" "Not really." Her smile turned wistful. "I've been trapped my whole life. A roof can't make it worse." The words lingered longer than she meant them to. By evening, the power flickered and went out completely. The mansion fell into silence. Thick, heavy, unfamiliar. Adrian's generator had failed. The house manager and staff had left earlier before the storm worsened, leaving only the two of them. When Elara entered the living room with candles, she found him there in the dark, staring into nothing. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I don't like silence," he said after a moment. "It's too loud." She set a candle on the table beside him. "Then talk." He gave her a look. "You're the one who doesn't stop." "Fine. I'll tell you something useless." Her voice was low, steady, filling the emptiness with something warm. "When I was little, I used to think thunder was God dragging furniture across the sky. I'd hide under the bed and yell at him to keep it down." "I can picture that," he said. "You bossing around the heavens." She grinned. "Someone had to." For a while, they simply sat there, storm raging outside, silence soft between them. Hours passed, the rain kept falling, relentless. When Adrian tried to wheel himself toward his bedroom, his chair jammed halfway through the hall. One of the back wheels caught on the uneven tile. He grunted, frustration flaring. "Don't," he warned, as Elara rushed over. But she ignored him, kneeling beside the chair, adjusting the stuck wheel until it clicked free. He stared at her, not with anger this time, but with a raw kind of vulnerability. "You really don't listen," he said. "No," she said, her tone gentle. "Because sometimes people say things they don't mean." "Like, leave me alone?" "Exactly." The air between them changed. The sound of the storm faded, replaced by something deeper, the kind of quiet where truth could breathe. Later, she found herself sitting at the edge of his room, a book in her lap. He couldn't sleep, and she refused to leave him alone with his thoughts. "What are you reading?" he asked finally. She held up the cover, an old novel, tattered and water-stained. "Something about broken people finding each other." "Figures," he murmured. "Why?" "Because broken people never find each other. They just crash." Elara looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe, but sometimes the crash is how they start to heal." He turned his face toward her candlelit silhouette, her eyes tired but fierce, her hands steady. For the first time in a long time, Adrian didn't feel like a burden. He just felt human. At some point, she drifted off in the chair beside his bed. Adrian watched her as the candlelight danced across her face, soft, unguarded. He couldn't remember the last time someone stayed close without demanding anything in return. He reached for the blanket, his trembling fingers barely brushing the edge, trying to pull it up over her shoulders. It slipped from his grip. But before frustration could win, she stirred and caught it herself. "You should sleep," she mumbled. "I could say the same to you." For once, the mansion didn't feel like a cage. It felt alive. Outside, thunder rolled, distant now, softer. The storm had broken something open inside them both. The storm passed, leaving behind a fragile quiet, that strange kind of peace that only comes after chaos. The world outside was washed clean, but inside the Langston mansion, the air was thick with unsaid things. Adrian had been different since that night, softer somehow. Still guarded, but the sharp edges of his sarcasm dulled a little. He spoke more, not much, but enough that Elara began to see glimpses of the man buried beneath the bitterness. He even smiled once or twice. Not at jokes, but at her, the kind of smile that said thank you without words. And then, one morning, everything shifted. Elara was tidying the library when she found an envelope tucked between two old journals. It was yellowed, edges worn, as if handled too many times. Inside was a photograph, Adrian standing beside another young man, both laughing, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Beneath it, a folded clipping from a newspaper. Wealthy heir involved in fatal crash. Close friend dies at the scene. Her breath caught. She hadn't meant to pry, but once the truth was in her hands, it refused to let her go. She read the article once, twice, her heart aching as the words burned into her mind. The friend's name was Liam Carver, only 24. The report said Adrian was driving, that he'd survived, that alcohol was involved. Her fingers trembled as she refolded the clipping and slid it back, but guilt clawed at her. She had glimpsed a wound not meant for her eyes. That evening, when she entered the living room, she found Adrian there, staring at the same photograph. His expression told her everything. He already knew she'd found it. "You read it," he said flatly. I froze. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." He laughed bitterly. "Accidents seem to follow me, don't they?" "Adrian." "Don't." His voice cracked, the sound raw and jagged. "You think you know what pain is? Try waking up every day knowing your best friend's dead because of you." Elara swallowed hard, her chest tight. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked." He cut her off with a look. "Don't pity me." "I don't," she said quietly. "I just understand what it's like to carry something heavy alone." "Understand?" he snapped. "What could you possibly understand about this?" Her eyes glistened. "I lost my mother when I was 16. We couldn't afford treatment. I still think about how maybe if I had worked harder, maybe if I had begged more." She stopped herself, breath shaking. Silence settled between them, sharp and aching. Adrian's jaw clenched. "We're both idiots then." "Maybe," she whispered, "but at least we're not pretending we don't hurt." The next few days were tense, not angry, just fragile. Words hung unspoken. She continued her duties in silence, careful not to cross invisible lines. He watched her from a distance, torn between shame and longing. Then one evening she came home from the hospital. Her brother's condition had worsened. She sat by the kitchen table, head in her hands, tears spilling freely. Adrian wheeled in quietly. He didn't speak, he just watched her cry, something inside him breaking. Finally he asked, "Is he going to be okay?" She shook her head. "Not if we can't pay for the next treatment." "Then I'll pay," he said instantly. Her head snapped up. "No, absolutely not." "Adrian, you think money fixes everything," she interrupted, standing. "It doesn't. It only makes people like me feel small." He stared at her, guilt flickering across his face. "That's not what I meant. I can't watch you suffer too." Her anger softened at that. "You already suffer enough for both of us." Something broke open between them then, a strange, tender understanding that neither could define. That night she found him in the music room, hands trembling above the piano keys. Slowly, painfully, he pressed one, a note that rang pure through the dark. "I used to play for Liam. He said music makes the soul lighter." Elara leaned against the doorway. "Maybe you should play again." He looked up, eyes tired but alive. "Only if you listen." And so she did, the first melody he'd played in nearly a year, broken and halting, but beautiful in its imperfection. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close. Do you believe guilt can ever be fully forgiven, or does it just learn to live quietly inside us? The following week felt lighter, as if something inside the mansion had shifted. The ghosts were still there, but quieter. The morning sunlight filtered through tall glass windows, catching dust motes that swirled like small, golden memories. Adrian spent more time outside, letting Elara push his wheelchair down the stone paths that wound through the Langston garden. He had hated the garden before. Too alive, too loud, too full of things he couldn't touch. But now he watched her brush her fingers over petals and talk about nothing, about how daisies reminded her of her mother, how the wind smelled different before rain. And somehow those small nothings began to mean everything. One afternoon, while they rested by the pond, Elara laughed at something he said, a real, unguarded laugh that startled even her. "What?" she asked when she caught him staring. I forgot what that sounded like. Laughter. The kind that doesn't sound rehearsed. Her expression softened. "You should try it sometime." He smirked. "What makes you think I can?" "Because I've seen you smile when you think I'm not looking." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Her eyes bright and alive, his clouded but curious. The air between them felt different now. Not heavy, not strained, just fragile, like something new trying to be born. Later that evening, she brought him tea while he sat near the fireplace. The flames danced across his face, casting flickers of gold over scars he'd stopped trying to hide. "You know," she said quietly, "you could teach again." "Teach?" he frowned. "Teach what? How to ruin lives?" "Music," she said gently. "You still have that." He looked away. "Nobody wants lessons from a broken man." "Then teach me." He blinked. "You? Why not? I've been listening long enough." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes weren't. She meant it, not as pity, but as something purer. A bridge. That night the lessons began. Her hands fumbled across the keys, clumsy but determined. He corrected her posture, his voice low, calm. "Not so stiff," he murmured. "You're playing like you're afraid of it." "Maybe I am." "Music doesn't hurt you, Elara." "Neither does love. Until it does," she said quietly. He froze, eyes meeting hers in the reflection on the piano's polished lid. Neither looked away. The silence between them carried a weight words couldn't touch. He broke it with a half smile. "You're terrible at this, you know." She laughed, a small, trembling sound. "Then I guess you'll have to keep teaching me." He didn't answer, but his gaze lingered a moment too long. As days turned into weeks, they fell into rhythm. Shared breakfasts, quiet lessons, late-night talks that wandered between pain and laughter. She began to see the boy he once was. He began to see the woman he'd been too blind to imagine. One afternoon, while they played, she noticed his hands, steady now, confident. "You're getting better," she teased. I chuckled. "I was already good." "No," she said, her voice soft. "You're healing." That word, healing, landed in the room like a prayer. It was sometime after midnight when she found him by the window, watching the city lights below. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking. About how I used to look down there and feel untouchable. Now I just see people, living, loving, losing, and I realize I was never really alive before." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You are now." He looked up at her then, really looked. The distance between them seemed to dissolve in the stillness. "Elara," he whispered, her name tasting like something new and dangerous. She didn't move. "Yes?" "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Then you'll never have to find out," she said simply. The words hit him harder than she knew. For a man who believed he was unworthy of love, that single promise was more powerful than any cure. For a while, it felt as though the mansion itself had learned to breathe again. Music filled the halls, laughter returned to the rooms that had once known only echoes. But happiness, fragile as it is, doesn't always warn you before it breaks. It began on an ordinary morning. Adrian was in the study, waiting for Elara to arrive. She was late, not like her. When she finally came, she looked different, tired, pale, her smile forced. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she lied. Just didn't sleep much. But she wasn't fine, and he knew it. That afternoon, while she was cleaning his room, Adrian received a call from his father's lawyer, a reminder that the board meeting was in 2 days. His father, ever pragmatic, still wanted him to resume control of Langston Industries, the empire he'd been too broken to face. He hung up, the conversation leaving a bitter taste. His father didn't care if he walked or rolled, as long as the company looked intact. When Elara walked in with his medication, he snapped without thinking. "Do you always have to hover?" She froze. "I'm not a child, Elara." She voice wavered. "I never said you were." "Then stop acting like I need saving." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe you don't, but sometimes people need saving from themselves." He looked up, eyes cold. "Don't pretend you understand me. You don't know what it's like to destroy someone's life and have to live with it." Her jaw tightened. "And you don't know what it's like to live every day wondering if your brother will survive the night." The room felt smaller, the distance between them unbearable. "Maybe we were both wrong," she said softly. "Maybe we were never meant to fix each other." She turned and left, the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall like a closing door. The next morning, she didn't come, nor the one after. Days passed, the piano gathered dust again. The house returned to silence, the kind Adrian had once craved but now couldn't stand. He called her number, no answer. He even sent her brother's clinic a donation under her name, an anonymous one. But it didn't ease the ache. He replayed every word of that fight until it tore him apart. She doesn't understand, he whispered to himself. She'll be better off. But each night, the lie felt heavier. One evening, the rain returned, softer this time, steady and rhythmic against the glass. Adrian wheeled himself to the piano, staring at the keys. His reflection looked older, lonelier. He played, clumsy, aching notes that carried everything he couldn't say aloud. Maybe she was right, he murmured. Maybe I didn't need saving. I just needed someone to care. His voice cracked on the last word. At that exact moment, his father entered. A rare visit. He's still wasting time on that? The old man said, eyes cold. Adrian turned, his voice low but firm. It's the only thing that still feels real. Real doesn't pay bills, his father replied sharply. That girl, what's her name? She's filling your head with nonsense. She's a distraction. Adrian's fists clenched on the wheels of his chair. She's the only reason I'm alive. His father scoffed. A poor girl with hospital debts? You think she loves you? She's using you, Adrian. That did it. Adrian's voice rose, not in anger but in pain. No, she's the only one who didn't. The words echoed through the hall, trembling with the weight of every truth he'd been too afraid to speak. When his father left, the mansion felt colder than ever. Adrian sat in the dark, staring at the door Elara used to walk through. The silence pressed in, the kind that swallowed you whole. He whispered her name once, twice. No one answered. For the first time since the crash, he wept. Not out of guilt, but out of loss. Because this time, it wasn't the past that haunted him. It was the future he might have had. Have you ever said something you didn't mean, only to realize too late that it cost you the one person who truly cared? Share your story. Maybe someone else needs to hear they're not alone. Weeks passed. The mansion, once filled with the soft sounds of music and laughter, had gone quiet again. Adrian no longer touched the piano. The garden wilted from neglect. Even the staff tiptoed through the halls as if the walls themselves were grieving. He had everything a man could want, wealth, comfort, power waiting for him. Yet he'd never felt poorer in his life. Every night he replayed that last argument with Elara, the way her eyes had dimmed when he'd pushed her away, the way she'd said, maybe we were never meant to fix each other. But what haunted him most was the possibility that she was right. One morning, a letter arrived, not addressed to him, but to the foundation his father funded. It was from the hospital. Elara's brother had passed away. The words blurred before his eyes. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. He found himself wheeling out into the cold without knowing why, through rain-soaked streets that blurred like tears. When he reached the hospital, his heart felt like it was being crushed from the inside out. Inside, he found her, sitting alone in the chapel, clutching a worn hospital bracelet in her hands. Her eyes were hollow, but when she saw him, she didn't look surprised. It was as though she had known he would come. "Adrian," she said quietly, voice frayed. He hesitated at the doorway, soaked and trembling. "I heard about your brother. I'm so sorry." She nodded, staring at the candlelight flickering near the altar. "He's free now. He's not hurting anymore." He wheeled closer, unsure of what to say. "I should have been there. No," she interrupted gently. "You couldn't save him, and you don't have to save me." Her calmness broke something inside him. Elara, I never meant what I said. I was angry. At myself, not at you. She looked up, eyes shining with grief. Then why did you make me feel like I was a mistake? He swallowed hard. Because I believed I was one. And when you looked at me like I wasn't broken, I didn't know what to do with that. Silence filled the small chapel. Heavy, aching, but alive. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. You think love fixes everything. It doesn't, but it makes pain bearable. He nodded slowly. Then let me bear it with you. Her eyes met his, weary but searching. Why now? Because for the first time, I want to live, and that started the day you walked into my house. Her lips trembled. A sob escaped before she could stop it. He reached out, hand shaking. She took it, their fingers intertwining. For a moment, neither spoke. The candles flickered. The rain softened outside. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. No sweeping music, no dramatic declarations. Just two broken souls, quietly choosing each other. Weeks later, Adrian convinced her to return to the mansion, not as an employee, but as a partner in the new music therapy center he was building in Liam's name. You really think people will come here to heal? She asked one morning, standing in the sunlit studio as the first students arrived. Children with braces, women recovering from trauma, men carrying invisible scars. He smiled. I know they will. Because I did. She laughed softly. That might be the most arrogant thing you've ever said. He turned his chair toward her. Maybe, but it's also the truest. Months passed. The mansion was alive again. Not with opulence, but with laughter, music, and the quiet hum of life being rebuilt. Sometimes late at night, Adrian would play, and Elara would sit beside him, humming softly. The melodies they created weren't perfect. Some notes slipped, some chords stumbled, but that's what made them real. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky, Adrian stopped playing and turned to her. You ever think we were meant to meet? He asked. She smiled faintly. I think sometimes the universe breaks us just enough so we fit back together. He reached for her hand. Steady now, no tremor, no hesitation. Then maybe broken isn't such a bad thing. She leaned in and whispered, Not if it leads you home. Their lips met, not desperate, not fragile, but certain. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a beginning, not an ending. A year later, the Langston Music Foundation opened its doors to hundreds of students from every walk of life. Adrian sat by the piano as the first recital began, Elara standing beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. When the children played the melody he'd once written for Liam, he closed his eyes. The sound wasn't flawless, a few wrong notes here and there, but to him, it was perfect. Elara leaned down and whispered, He'd be proud of you. So would your brother, he murmured. She smiled through her tears. Maybe they are. Maybe they're listening. The final chord hung in the air. Raw, human, and beautiful. And for the first time, Adrian felt free. She used to believe love was a luxury the poor couldn't afford, until she met the man who had everything except hope. Now, together, they had something even richer. Peace. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even broken souls can find their way back to love, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story like this one. Your support helps us share more stories of pain, hope, and redemption with the world. Would you forgive someone who once broke you if they returned with love in their eyes? Drop your thoughts in the comments.